1967년 경기도 의정부에서 미군과 한국 여성 사이에 예쁜 여자아이가 태어납니다. 하지만 아이는 1년 만에 고아원에 맡겨집니다. 55년이 지난 지금 그는 어디에서 어떤 모습으로 살고 있을까요? 여러분 안녕하십니까? 한국보건복지부 산하 아동권리보장원과 미주중앙일보가 함께 만드는 Looking for Mom Together입니다. 진행의 최인성입니다. 아이의 출생을 모르고 한국을 떠난 아버지, 혼자 남아 아이를 키울 수 없어 고아원에 맡긴 어머니, 부모를 그리면서 혼돈의 시기를 거쳐 이제는 작가가 된 입양인이 있습니다. 오늘 Looking for Mom Together는 앨리스 스티븐스, 김숙 씨를 스튜디오로 초대했습니다. Well, thanks for coming, Alice.
Thank you for having me, Brian, and Korea Daily. I'm really happy to be here. Okay, my name is Alice Stevens. I was adopted from Korea in 1968 at the age of 9 months old into a white family in America. And I had a very international childhood, and now I am a writer. So what I know is from my forms, my adoption forms, and I was born in 1967 to a Korean woman and American serviceman. My mother apparently gave me up shortly after I was born. I lived with a foster mother. My understanding is she gave me up because in that time there was no room for mixed race babies, but I believe that my mother came to visit me at the foster mother because I have photos of me when I was not just a little baby, but getting older, that she had sent to my birth father. I was given up to Korean Social Services, Inc., and adopted through Welcome House to a family with 3 biological children of their own, very loving family. The other picture that you showed, the first picture, was one of the photos that was taken by my birth mother while I was in foster home. So I have 3 of those photos too. And those 3 photos are very precious to me because that's proof that she was looking after me, and she still wanted to, hold on to some kind of relationship with me. And on the back of that one, there's a little writing. I don't know if it's her handwriting because I don't think she could speak English, but it was her words. So those are like the only things that I have of her. It's great questions, Brian, and I really can't tell you the truth for my name, which Kim Suk. So I went back to Korea with this wonderful program called Me in Korea, which takes Korean adoptees back. I went to KSS, the agency through which I was adopted, and had an interview. And in that interview, I got the shocking news that the name that I had always thought was my birth mother's was probably not real. So that name was Kim Ok-ja. And apparently that was a very, very common name, like Jane Smith in the 60s. And the social worker said it is more than likely that somebody gave her that name so that I would never be able to trace her. That then made me think, well, is my name Kim Suk, the one that I always thought was the name that she gave me and that's on my papers? Is that real? And I really don't know. They didn't tell me. They said they didn't know. She didn't say, yes, we gave you this name, or yes, your mother gave you this name. She said she didn't know. So I really don't know. I have no idea. So the information that I had about my birth parents was what I had on my adoption documents. It said that They were in a 13-month relationship. My father was in the U.S. Army. He was SP4 rank. My birth mother was 35 years old, which is pretty old. And it said that it had her history, which was she was married before to a Korean man, and it was an unhappy marriage, and he was abusive to her. She left him. She came, around to the camps, the U.S. Army camps, and that's how she made her living. And that was about it. There was some description of my father. They said my father was white, was Caucasian, which wasn't true. So my birth father's name is Roman Islas. So he's a Mexican-American. He came from Southern California. He was in the Army, did a tour in Korea, did a tour in Germany, came back here, settled down, had a family. And I have been reunited with relatives on that side, and they all say he's a very good man, he was a very loving man. They all had wonderful things to say about him. So I was adopted into a family that lived in Philadelphia. When I was 4 years old, we moved to Botswana, which is in southern Africa. So for 6 years, I lived there. It was a lovely childhood. At that time, there was no TV, there was no cars, etc. I have 2 older brothers and a sister. Just a lovely family. I couldn't have asked for a better family. I've heard a lot from other adoptees, and I really know how fortunate I am to have a family like that. And they gave me, all the opportunities that I could ask for. So I was adopted in a time when adoption was not as Korean adoption, the numbers were still pretty low when I was adopted. And also it was in '67, so it was shortly after the immigration laws had changed. So there were no Koreans where I lived. And also at that time, adoption was also a secret. And I didn't meet my first adoptee until I was a teenager. And I did not meet my first Korean adoptee until I was in my mid-20s. I was in Oregon, on the West Coast. So I was very isolated. And I was isolated from the Korean adoptee community, and also because of my age, I wasn't as aware of all of the social media and the internet stuff and how people were connecting over that medium. So I was just really, really isolated, but I was always thinking about my adoption. You can't not think about it if you're a Korean adoptee and a transracial adoptee. So it kind of put it out of my mind. Then I wrote a novel about adoption. And through that novel, I started to get more connected with the CAD community. I found out about this program, Me in Korea, as I talked about before, that takes CADs back to Korea. And I had taken my DNA test too. So that was all just kind of the way that it converged, and I wasn't that aware. A lot of adoptees my age were in touch with the social media a lot before I was. So I went on this trip, and during the trip I was taken to KSS, and then I was taken to Uijeongbu, where I was born, and we walked around the streets. We went to an old neighborhood where women who used to work around the camp still lived. And we had the photo of my mother and my father. We asked women who used to work around the camps, we showed them the photo. Nothing came of it, but also a town hall worker volunteered to help us as well. And she helped us find the address where my mother lived. And where likely I was born, so that's the photo I have in front of that address. Yeah, I mean, that's a complicated question, but I do feel like I was attracted to fiction writing because of my early life, because my early life was kind of a fiction. And I think a lot of adoptees understand that there's more than one story, there's more than one possibility, there's more than one alternative, and that makes us look for different explanations, different origin stories, just makes us think outside of the box. So, as I'm sure you know, Brian, there are a lot of really creative adoptees. And I think that's just because our circumstances make us, question everything. Whereas people who aren't adopted tend to be a lot more complacent. So questioning things, I think, also makes us more creative and makes us have things to say. So I've always loved reading. I've always wanted to be a writer. But it wasn't until I was a very mature adult that I started to address adoption in my writing. And I do think that being adopted really had a strong influence on me wanting to write and wanting to get a different story out there instead of the same story. So the adoption story, the way that Americans or much of the world looks at the adoption story is through a very sentimental lens. And I want to make that so that people understand it's a much more nuanced story. But I have given a DNA sample to the Korean consulate here in Washington, D.C. They have a program through NCRC where if they accept your application, which they don't always accept applications from adoptees, if they accept your application, then they will invite you to come to the nearest Korean consulate and give them your DNA. They will put it in the national database, or at least that's what I understand, in the NCRC database. And it is there in case other relatives are looking for me. I would say, I understand why you give me up and why you gave me up. I know that you did it from love and that I love you and I'm thinking of you always. And I hope that someday I can learn more about you. If not meet you, I can learn more about you. But thank you for everything you did for me, and I love you very much. Well, I just want to say thank you very much for this opportunity. I hope that you get more adoptees here. Thank you for publicizing our stories. It's very important, and I really appreciate that you and Korea Daily recognize that. Well, I'm working on another adoption novel, another novel that I want to publish. I want to take my children to Korea. I'm so glad to have found my Mexican family, my American family, and hope to build up relations with them. And I hope to find my mother.
오늘 Looking for Mom Together는 67년 의정부에서 태어나 미국으로 입양된 앨리스 스티븐스 김숙 씨와 이야기 나눴습니다. 앨리스 스티븐스 김숙 씨입니다. 혹시 여러분 영상 속의 김숙 씨, 앨리스 스티븐스 씨를 알고 계십니까? 혹시 김숙 씨의 올해 91살이 되신 어머니를 아시거나 보신 적이 있다면 저희에게 곧바로 연락을 주시기 바랍니다. 여러분들이 해주실 일이 또 있습니다. 이 영상을 더 많은 분들이 볼 수 있도록 도와주십시오. 앨리스 스티븐스 김숙 씨의 이야기는 여기까지입니다. 여러분들 시간 내주셔서 감사합니다. 저는 미주중앙일보의 최인성이었습니다. 감사합니다.